Al Pacino doesn't flip tables or storm off set. He does something far more unsettling: he goes quiet. And when Pacino cuts you out, he cuts deep. After that, it was downhill. "Paramount didn't want me, Brando, nobody," he once admitted. For decades, Pacino has been the heartbeat of modern cinema. From Serpico to The Godfather, he's carried entire generations of storytelling on his shoulders. But behind the curtain, it wasn't always Oscars and standing ovations. He's walked away from directors, clashed with legends, and quietly blacklisted co-stars, permanently. Pacino doesn't burn bridges. He buries them. Dog Day Afternoon, Scent of a Woman, Heat. His performances weren't just intense, they were volcanic. But when the chemistry soured, that same fire turned ice cold. And unlike most Hollywood players, Pacino doesn't do damage control. If you land on his list, you stay there. It was too much. The connection was overpowering me. It was so steady, it almost consumed me, he confessed once. He shared the screen with De Niro, Nicholson, Brando, and Walken. But not all of them made it out unscathed. These are the 6 actors Pacino quietly froze out, why they were cut, and why the silence was final. Stick around, because the last name on this list, even the director refuses to talk about it. William Friedkin. William Friedkin. After the Godfather trilogy, Al Pacino's first major directing partnership came in 1980 with William Friedkin on Cruising, a dark, unsettling plunge into New York's underground. What began as artistic chemistry quickly soured into bitter contempt. Friedkin, riding high off the French Connection, expected Pacino to show up sharp, rehearsed, and disciplined. Instead, Pacino arrived late, lines half-learned, improvising in ways that clashed violently with Friedkin's razor-tight direction. The director, a perfectionist to his core, seethed. He later called Pacino unprepared, disrespectful, even accusing him of treating the set like a frat house. Pacino, stubborn and visceral, bristled under Friedkin's rigid control. He refused to be micromanaged, insisting he knew his character better than anyone alive. Their standoff grew so toxic that Friedkin nearly fired him more than once. Later, he dropped a line that cut like glass. "He was the biggest disappointment I've ever worked with." On set, the air was thick with tension. Crew members whispered of shouting matches, long silences, and late-night explosions. Pacino stood his ground, but the fallout was immediate. Friedkin iced him out completely. No phone calls. No future projects. No reconciliation. Critics rarely dwell on the feud, choosing instead to spotlight the film's controversy and cult status. But the silence tells the real story. No joint interviews, no nostalgic reunions, no rekindled collaboration. Pacino quickly moved on, working with younger directors who gave him space and trust. Friedkin, meanwhile, carried the grudge like a scar. What's left between them is a single film, an ambitious, unsettling relic overshadowed by bitterness. In Hollywood, partnerships can birth legends. But when ego collides with ego, one bond can shatter forever. Friedkin's verdict still lingers, the biggest disappointment. And Pacino, true to form, never looked back. James Foley. James Foley. When Glengarry Glen Ross hit theaters, critics praised Al Pacino's performance as razor-sharp, raw, explosive, and coiled like a spring ready to snap. But behind the scenes, his chemistry with director James Foley was anything but harmonious. Foley, a filmmaker known for precision and discipline, suddenly found himself grappling with Pacino's unpredictable storm of energy. Pacino would veer off script mid-take, shift tone without warning, and flat-out refuse to rehearse a scene the same way twice. To Foley, it was chaos. To Pacino, it was fire. One crew member later summed it up perfectly: Foley wanted tension. Pacino wanted combustion. That balance nearly tore the set apart. The result on screen was electric, unforgettable. But the process nearly broke them both. Unlike Pacino's long history of returning to directors he trusted, he and Foley never reunited. And when Foley was asked years later if he'd work with Pacino again, his only answer was a tight smile. No feud, no public words, just silence. In Hollywood, that silence said everything. The film was lightning in a bottle. But for Pacino, when the rhythm's off, he doesn't stick around to fix it. He moves on. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando. When Al Pacino won the role of Michael Corleone in The Godfather, it transformed his career, but it also put him in the shadow of Marlon Brando, a man he admired and quietly resented. On screen, their chemistry was electric. Off-screen, it was far more complicated. Brando was already a legend, a star the studio indulged. When he arrived late to rehearsals, improvised lines, or butted heads with Francis Ford Coppola, no one dared hold him accountable. Pacino, still a virtual unknown, wasn't given that same freedom. The double standard cut deep. The tension boiled over during awards season. Brando walked away with the Oscar for Best Actor, while Pacino, who carried much of the film, was relegated to a supporting actor nomination. Feeling robbed, Pacino refused to attend the ceremony. Years later he confessed, "I didn't think it was right. I was in that movie more than he was." It wasn't just a complaint, it revealed a deeper rivalry. In time, the two drifted apart. They never worked together again. Pacino never trashed Brando publicly, but he rarely praised him either, offering only polite admiration. For someone who shaped so much of his career, Brando became less of a legacy and more of a looming shadow. It wasn't hatred, but disappointment, laced with envy, pride, and a stubborn sense of injustice. In Hollywood, feuds don't always make headlines. Sometimes silence does the talking. And Pacino's silence made one thing clear. He may have shared the screen with Brando, but he had no intention of following in his footsteps. Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro. Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are often spoken of in the same breath, two titans who helped shape the very language of American cinema. They've shared the screen in The Godfather Part 2, Heat, Righteous Kill, and The Irishman. But despite the iconic pairings, their real-life relationship has always been far more complicated than fans might imagine. When Heat was filming in the mid-90s, anticipation was sky-high. For the first time, audiences would see Pacino and De Niro face-to-face in a single scene. Everyone expected sparks. What they got was distance. Behind the camera, the two barely exchanged words. De Niro, ever the craftsman, preferred quiet preparation. Pacino thrived on intensity, instinct, and improvisation. Director Michael Mann had to balance the storm, adjusting his methods to guide two very different forces toward the same collision point. Pacino once summed it up bluntly, "Bob's a craftsman. I'm more instinct. We work differently." It wasn't an insult, but it wasn't exactly praise either. The divide only became more visible years later on The Irishman. Both men delivered deeply layered performances, yet those on set described their energy as cold, professional but detached. No laughter between takes. No late-night bonding. Martin Scorsese often had to play mediator, keeping things smooth. Even in interviews, the chill lingers. Pacino calls De Niro a colleague. De Niro, when asked about Pacino's process, shrugs with a flat, "He's good at what he does." No fire, no warmth, just mutual respect buried under layers of restraint. In Hollywood, some feuds explode into the open. Others stay hidden behind flawless professionalism. For Pacino and De Niro, it's the latter. No shouting matches, no scandals, just a silence that's lasted decades, where a friendship could have grown. So when Pacino admitted, "We're not friends. We just show up," it wasn't bitterness. It was the quiet truth behind a legendary duo that never truly clicked. Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle Pfeiffer. When Scarface was casting in the early 80s, Michelle Pfeiffer was far from the obvious choice. She was still a relative unknown, with only a handful of minor credits and a name most in Hollywood didn't yet take seriously. Al Pacino, already a powerhouse, wasn't shy about his doubts. According to multiple accounts, he flat-out resisted the idea of Pfeiffer playing Elvira Hancock. He told producers she was too soft, lacking the cold edge Tony Montana's guarded love interest demanded. Pfeiffer later admitted she could feel his disapproval during auditions. "I knew he didn't want me there," she recalled years later. "I had to prove I belonged in that room." And prove it she did. Her audition was so magnetic that director Brian De Palma overruled Pacino's hesitation. Still, the tension never fully lifted. On set, Pacino kept her at arm's length. No warm-ups, no bonding, just icy professionalism. Even after Scarface became a cult classic, Pacino rarely mentioned Pfeiffer in interviews. And while she continued to speak respectfully of him, she never denied their dynamic was strained. Ironically, it was Pfeiffer who delivered the performance that gave the film its unexpected depth. Her Elvira was sharp, jaded, vulnerable, and tragic, exactly what the story needed. But Pacino's resistance left a scar. They never worked together again. Hollywood is full of what-if collaborations, but this one stings. A legendary film, 2 unforgettable performances, and a partnership that ended before it ever had the chance to grow. Because when Al Pacino draws a line, he almost never steps back over it. Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman. Al Pacino and Gene Hackman only crossed paths once on screen, but that single meeting left behind a quiet rift that never healed. Scarecrow, 1973, became a critical gem, praised for its raw, human performances. Yet, while audiences saw magic, the set told another story. Pacino was the rising star, sensitive, method-driven, endlessly probing. Hackman was already the grizzled heavyweight, fresh off the French Connection, impatient with detours, blunt, and no-nonsense. From the very start, their energies clashed. One searched for emotional truth in every pause. The other wanted to cut straight to the point. They didn't ignite, they repelled. Pacino would later put it delicately in an interview, "Working with Gene, it wasn't the easiest. We had different ideas." But that soft understatement masked the storm. Crew members whispered that Hackman bristled at Pacino's pace, often cutting into scenes, questioning direction, and dismissing the drawn-out explorations. "He doesn't like wasting time," one recalled. And to him, Al was wasting time. There were no shouting matches, no public blow-ups, but the silence after Scarecrow spoke louder than any scandal. They never reunited, never praised each other, never looked back. In Hollywood, where grudges often turn into spectacle, this one stayed quiet. Pacino didn't slam the door, he simply never opened it again. That's the Pacino way. His legacy is built not just on intensity, but on instinct. He doesn't air dirty laundry, doesn't drag names through interviews. He just exits the room, closes the chapter, and moves on. And sometimes, the loudest feud is the one you never hear. You don't catch the fight, you only notice who never shares the stage again. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from behind the spotlight. And drop a comment below. Which actor on this list surprised you the most?